Good morning. Welcome to this gathering of Journey Imperfect Faith Community. My name is Christina Wisdom, and I'm a journeyer. It's important to say today that this is a safe space. You are welcome here, no matter your political beliefs or none, your religious beliefs or none, no matter your skin color, your age, your sexuality, your nationality. In the world God loves, there are no illegal people. There are none who do not belong. There are none who are not beloved. You are God's beloved. Wherever you are in this moment, you are welcome here and wanted here. I invite you today to consider how you give financially to Journey and its work in the world. We give away 10% of the money that comes in to people in need and causes that advance our missions of compassion, justice, and spirit. Today is the final day of our Summer Lighthouse fundraiser, so please donate to it above your regular ongoing giving. If you have any questions about Journey or want more information about what we do, please visit our website at www.journeyifc.com. Our theme today is paper cranes. In many Eastern traditions, cranes are symbols of hope, peace, and healing. And today we will talk about how God calls us to act in hope even when life is difficult or when we face discouraging or threatening times. Mahatma Gandhi wrote, "When every hope is gone, when helpers fail and comforts flee, I find that help arrives somehow from I know not where. Supplication, worship, prayer are no superstition. They are acts more real than the acts of eating, drinking, sitting, or walking. It is no exaggeration to say they alone are real and all else is unreal." So I ask you to stop wherever you are right now. Let's relax. Let's breathe together into the space. Open your hands. Open your mind. Open your heart. Let's breathe for a moment, opening ourselves to the possibility of what can happen when we place our trust and faith in healing and peace. So let's breathe together. One more time. Amen. Our scripture this morning comes from the story of the 7th century BCE Jewish prophet Jeremiah, chapter 32. The capital city of Judah, Jerusalem, was under siege by the Babylonian army, and Jeremiah the prophet was being held in the court of the guard in the royal palace. The king confronted Jeremiah, saying, "Why do you continue to tell us that God has decided to hand this city over to the Babylonians, who will drag me away to face their king?" Jeremiah answered, "A message from God told me to buy a field near my hometown. So I bought the field from my cousin for 7 ounces of silver. And with the townspeople around me, I said, 'God, commander of spirit armies and king of Israel, told me to put the deed to this field in a clay jar to seal it. God wants this to be a sign to us. God says, the day will come when my people, though they will be defeated by the Babylonians, will buy houses and vineyards and fields again in this land.'"
Sadako Sasaki was 2 years old when the atomic bomb was detonated over Hiroshima, Japan. She and her family lived 1 mile from the blast's hypercenter. Her brother, mother, and grandmother all amazingly survived the explosion, but her grandmother would die later that day. Sadako's father was away serving in the military and was called to assist the rescue teams in the bomb's aftermath. Sadako's parents would both suffer illness from the effects of radiation months later, but Sadako and her brother seemed to escape without lasting harm. Sadako was a particularly athletic child who loved to run. One day, 9 years after the bomb's blast, she experienced a painful swelling under her ears. Sadako was diagnosed with leukemia and given a mere 3 months to a year to live. With a deep desire to lift Sadako's spirits, her parents decided to make her a kimono, an expensive honor usually reserved for mature women in Japan. Together with her father, Sadako chose a cherry blossom design. Sadako's class would soon be holding a graduation party. Sadako attended the party wearing her beautiful kimono. Her classmates gave Sadako a red notebook signed by each of them and a traditional wooden doll known as a kokeshi. Back at the hospital, Sadako had befriended a young girl with tuberculosis named Kiyo. One day, someone delivered hundreds of folded paper cranes to the hospital. A nurse presented the origami cranes to Sadako and Kiyo. Sadako recalled the legend that anyone who folded 1,000 paper cranes would be granted a wish. With great enthusiasm, Sadako and her friend began the effort to do just that. Sadako wished to be healed and to be able to run again. She wished for more than that, though. She wished to end all suffering and to bring peace to mankind. Despite her deteriorating health, Sadako achieved the ambitious 1,000 crane goal in 3 weeks. Shortly thereafter, Kiyo was indeed cured and released. A bittersweet occasion for Sadako, for Sadako's condition had become still graver, and so she steadfastly resolved to fold another 1,000. Within a month, however, her health was so poor she could no longer continue. Some 1,500 cranes now filled her room. As Sadako's last moments approached, her room would also fill with friends and relatives. On the morning of October 25, 1955, Sadako lost her battle. At the funeral service, Sadako's body was robed with the cherry blossom kimono. The kokeshi doll given to her by her classmates was placed in the casket along with heaps of Sadako's beloved paper cranes. Sadako's parents then offered the rest of the cranes to Sadako's classmates. The cranes now had a new purpose: to offer remembrance of Sadako and to carry her heavenward, wherefrom she could protect Hiroshima and the world with her wish for peace. Her classmates were quite moved and wished to honor Sadako in some way. With the help of their teacher and a determined volunteer, they hatched a plan to build a memorial statue of Sadako and to the children who suffered and died from the atomic bomb. With impressive ingenuity, the students astonishingly raised $450,000 from all over Japan. The funds were used to build the beautiful Children's Peace Monument in Hiroshima. On May 5, 1958, Children's Day in Japan, the statue crowning the monument was unveiled, a figure of Sadako lifting a crane skyward. At the base of the monument is a plaque with the following words engraved in stone: "This is our cry, this is our prayer, to create peace in the world."
Hey Journeyers, it's Rick. I'm here with Wade Estes, who is awesome and also happens to be the president of the Shepherds as of last month. And Wade is great, and we got to be good friends this last year. But I kept seeing Wade appear on Christmas Eves a few times before that. And Wade, I wanted to ask you, this is the last Sunday of the fundraiser, and I wanted to ask you why you stopped coming to Journey just on Christmas Eve with your family. What about Journey and its mission is meaningful for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought it was funny that you asked me to join you today because I watched your sermon last week and you talking about Journey's evolution from a bunch of people just saying like, well, I guess I can do something and doing it and that being kind of the lifeblood of the church and organization is 100% my story and how I got involved. And yeah, I kind of would go sporadically with my buddy Ethan, and it was kind of weird where we're both single guys showing up. You don't really know anyone, but I always liked the message, and I went to a men's retreat and some of the other stuff and like that. And we would always go on Christmas Eve. So my mom's birthday is on Christmas Eve, and my grandfather's a pastor, so she likes going to church, and that's like a part of her life. And she was in town, I guess, a couple of years ago, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna be a good son, and I know a church. Let's go to the service. And when we were there, I was expecting just to kind of hang out, hear the nativity scene spiel, and instead you talked about Mary and how it was scary for her and how God just appeared and said, hey, you should do this, and how strong she was in doing that. And I had a real moment of clarity where what I was scared of and what God was telling me to do is just show up, just to go to this place and
Mhm.
kind of avoid all that other, well, it's Sunday, I could do other things, or I don't know if I want to feel vulnerable this week, and just do it. And so I made a pact, like whatever they asked me to do, I'm going to do it. And man, not a month later, Margaret was like, hey, I need help with the newsletter. And I was thinking, oh, heck no, I'm definitely not doing that. I don't know 95% of the people on the newsletter. But she still needed help a couple weeks later, and it's something that I know how to do. You know, I have a background in digital marketing, and so I
Mhm.
just told her that I would, and that spiraled into the website and now the Shepherds, and it's been kind of a mind-blowing experience to be the president. I've talked with a couple people about it just in conversation, and they're like, "So what's going on with you?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I guess I'm president of this church that I'm going to now." And no one gets it, and I don't really get it. And it's like, what? Are you a deacon? Oh no. Did you like do something special? Not really. I don't know. And they can't compute because they're thinking like of all the red tape that I had to have cut through. And really the beautiful thing about Journey and what I've come to love about it is there is no red tape.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do, you just do it. And I think what you said last week is really spot on in that it might not be the perfect job or the job that you think you have in your head or what you think you're qualified for, but the freedom to kind of make it your own and the freedom to really uh, progress the organization and kind of be a member of the church is there. And there are no reinforcements. Like there's
Mhm.
no other body that's going to send people. And so, you know, we need that. And it's been fun kind of digging into the act and the service part of it, in addition to, you know, the spiritual and kind of mental stuff.
Yeah. I'm really, really glad. That's a good story, and I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad, you dragged Ethan along too. I mean, whatever. He's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, no, man, I'm glad you're here, and it's a huge gift to give. And thanks for telling us about your experience and how you have stepped up. And that deal you made with God is, hey, man, it's working for me. So
I,
glad you're here.
I've been really grateful for all the trust, you know, all the, you know, support with whatever I wanted to do and the freedom and it's been a growing experience for me and so I think it's mutual for sure.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Rick.
Hello, Jennifer Scariano. How are you today?
Hello. How are you?
You and Christina had a class together this past spring
Yes,
in which you made paper cranes.
I did. The
Not everybody
assignment,
made cranes.
no, although they could have. The
Well,
assignment was to, what was exactly? The assignment was to engage in some creative activity, some act that the class was on the intersection between beauty and theology and social justice. So,
beauty,
how much fun?
theology, social justice.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one of the assignments was to, throughout the course of the semester, be working on some project that created beauty. And she was very clear that we shouldn't get too hung up on it. We shouldn't get too wrapped around the axle about it. We shouldn't, pick something that was gonna become onerous. That wasn't the purpose of the assignment. So in the 70s, when I was growing up, I was also an only child. And so people were forever giving me origami kits, because what else do you give only children, right? They don't have anybody to play with. They're a little bit weird. They want to be by themselves all the time anyway. So
Wow.
my whole life I've been receiving origami kits. Unfortunately, I have terrible spatial skills when it comes to following those kind of directions that come with 70s origami kits, like folding it, what? Like, is that an up or a down? And so it was always sort of this, I don't know, it's kind of chasing the dragon of being able to do origami. So when this project came up, since I was a child, YouTube has been invented. And I am very, very good at following YouTube directions. So I can just watch someone do a video and then I can do something.
Yeah.
It felt like I could finally do origami because I had a different way of getting the information in. And I had read somewhere that it's, good luck to fold 1,000 cranes. I don't remember where I heard that, but I've heard it at different places throughout my life, like sort of heard that mentioned. And so ignoring Claire's instructions to not turn this into something onerous or something that that turns into a chore, I decided to fold 1,000 cranes for the class.
Has any other tradition suggested 100 as opposed to 1,000? I mean, I'm just saying, you can shop. We shop religious traditions all the time. You could shop theological or philosophical.
Sure.
No, 1,000. It had to be 1,000.
Well, I tried to keep in mind that, like, the purpose of this is kind of the process, not the product. So if halfway through it started to feel like, oh my God, I hate this project and I never want to see it again, then I gave myself permission to stop there. Like, there was no, I mean, I wasn't going to get graded, obviously, on the number of cranes I folded. So I tried to kind of hold that loosely. But I didn't feel that way. I enjoyed it the whole time. And then at the end, I very much felt like, okay, I don't need to fold any more cranes.
What came up for you? Was there resistance at all? Were there things that did you have beauty that came out of it? Did your buttons get pushed? Did you get sick of it? Did you see joy in it? All the above?
Yeah. I actually didn't get sick of it. I was surprised. I thought that I would, but I didn't. I was really aware of something that, people have been telling me forever, which is, I think the more we know about neurobiology and things like that, that doing repetitive hand-eye movements is good neurologically if you're feeling anxious.
Yep.
And I really was aware of that I could sit down with the pile of paper feeling one way and I felt a very different way 30 cranes later. So that was really nice. I mean, because it was during this whole pandemic time that it sort of started happening. And so that was helpful. And it was also helpful to know that, like, okay, I'm feeling super anxious or angry or whatever. Okay, why don't you try folding 10 cranes and see if you feel different? Like, you don't have to believe me, just try it. And it did make me feel different and it was helpful. I bought lots of different papers, so somehow that kept it from getting boring. And it was over, 4 or 5 months. So I mean, really, we're only talking about folding, a handful of cranes a day, or putting on a bunch of Marvel movies and going on a folding bender, which was also fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was interesting was in the class, we'd have to report in, like, how's your project going? Where are you in your project? And Claire kept asking me, like, what's going on with you? Where are you? What are you going to do with them? What, questions like that. And I was I just had this sense that like the Cranes and I were going to work it out. Like I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know why I was doing it. I didn't know what I was going to do with it when I was done. But that it really didn't matter. That, you know, at some point the Crane's purpose would be made clear to me, and I didn't have to worry too much about that. And then you ended up with them. So the Cranes found their purpose.
Sure.
It's important to know that Jeremiah is the weeping prophet. Hi! That's the cat. The reason Jeremiah was called the weeping prophet is because he saw that something was deeply wrong in his culture, that the powerful were living off of the poor and the enslaved and the outsider, and that anybody who was not clean ritually, and all that stuff means about who's a sinner and who's acceptable to God and all that those people were thrown out, cast out, ignored, unloved. And he believed that the country was so corrupt and so disconnected from what he believed God's priorities were: taking care of widows and orphans, taking care of outsiders, welcoming the stranger, taking up the cause of the oppressed, being faithful to and listening to and being guided by God specifically, and not just what I think is best or what I think is smartest or what I've figured out on my to-do list. That he said, God is going to come and there's going to be a reckoning. And in the particular case of Jeremiah and the nation of Judah in the south, he said the empire of the Babylonians is coming, and King Nebuchadnezzar and all of his helpers and allies all around us, and all of his generals and all of his armies are coming, and they're going to tear Jerusalem, our capital city, to the ground. And various leaders pushed back and said within Judah, which is the southern part of Israel, and said, oh, why are you so, you're such a downer. You're such a buzzkill. Why are you so mean? And he said, I'm just telling you what I see. And he did all kinds of prophetic actions, all kinds of things to say, do you not see what's happening? Do you not see how terrible it's going to be? And he tried different talks and speeches, and he tried different demonstrations. He attracted a group of people who were listening, and yet at the same time ultimately just ends up on his own. And he weeps over the city and over what God is doing, and he says, I promise you the Babylonians are coming. And it is a direct result of your unwillingness to listen and your unwillingness to change and look at your stuff. You won't look at your stuff. You want to just stay fat and satisfied and happy, well-fed, well-entertained. This is not an original or an isolated critique that Jeremiah gives. Lots of critics and lots of prophets and lots of reformers have talked this way through the Jewish scriptures, and John the Baptist, a Jewish prophet, and Jesus, a Jewish prophet, all say, hey, you guys are missing the point. You've become self-satisfied. You've become rich off the backs of the poor. All you care about is comfort, and you only pray to God when you're in trouble. And all along the way, when an empire gets fat and sassy and self-absorbed and doesn't care about the outsider and the leftovers and the oppressed, God sends prophets to say this is wrong, like Gandhi, like St. Francis of Assisi, like Jesus, like Martin Luther King Jr., like the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement that we have in our culture, like the Me Too movement. All of them that are saying, wait a minute, we're upside down. We are not paying attention to the people on the outside. And the empire never wants to listen to the people on the outside and the margins, the fringes, because that just is more work. And what we like is law and order and simplicity, and for people to behave and to do what they're told and to know their place. And quit making all this trouble. You sure are loud. All this stuff about XYZ, ABC. I don't know what term you guys want to be called now. I don't know what it is that you've decided your list of demands is. Y'all, this is not something here in the United States of America in the last 50 or 60 years in my lifetime, since the civil rights and women's movement and other movements in the 1960s and 70s. This is how the biblical prophets talked. This is Amos. This is Micah. This is Jeremiah. And in the midst of all of this squabbling and all of this warning and all of this disaster that Jeremiah has to continue to step up and speak, even though it's not easy. It's hard. And he weeps and he feels abandoned and he feels left alone. At one point he gets thrown into a pit. He gets thrown into prison. And he's in the guardhouse. He's in the king's castle where the soldiers are, in the quarters where they put prisoners, and soldiers beat the hell out of them. And the king calls to him and says, why do you keep saying that the Babylonians are coming and that they're going to drag me away and I'm going to have to stand in front of the king in Babylon? Why don't you shut up? Why do you keep doing this? And Jeremiah says a really interesting thing in the story that Christina read for today. It's a really interesting shift in this message of prophetic call to reform and also a warning of disaster. He says, God told me that my cousin was going to come and tell me that there's a piece of property in our family and that I need to buy it. Now, why in the world would you buy a field outside the little town that you're from, Anathoth, out, headed towards the desert east of Jerusalem? Why, if your job is to be a prophet, and you are in the capital city confronting the powers that be, and by the way, this obviously goes on for months, years, that he's a thorn in the side, that he is an irritant, a fly in the honey. Why would you, if you were Jeremiah and you know the Babylonians are coming, and the Babylonians do come in 587 BCE, and destroy Jerusalem, just as Jeremiah predicted, why would you buy a field? Wouldn't you want to keep your money, whatever money you have? Wouldn't you want to just give up on all that stuff and say, to hell with it, I'm going to go live in my compound and wait for the Babylonians to come and keep my head down? He decides that God is telling him something important, which is, buy this field, even though you will not see it. And God doesn't say, okay, this is the exact number of days, months, whatever, that the leaders of Judah and Israel are going to be dragged off. Israel overall. Judah in the south, which is where we are now. God doesn't say this is the day when they'll all get to be set free and come back. What God says is, they're coming, they're going to destroy you, Jeremiah, I want you to buy a field. And the reason I want you to buy a field, because it's a symbol. It's a message. And the message is, one day, my people will have fields in which they will plant, and they'll have gardens, and they'll have vineyards, and they'll have houses with children. One day, and I can't tell you when, right? God doesn't say it'll be exactly 70 years from blah, 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 which is what I would really like. When is the pandemic going to be over? When do we get to go back to the restaurants? When do we get to go back to school like we used to? When are we going to get back to normal? I don't know. The leaders of Judah and Israel are dragged away, and they are in Babylon, which might as well have been Mars. You know, it's Iraq. It's a long way away. They're there for 70 years. Most of the ones who are adults never get back to the promised land. They die in Babylon. This has to be more than just, I get to feel better and I get what I want. And I get back what I was missing. Paper crane making, as you see from that beautiful story about that young woman in Hiroshima, is about hope without certainty. Faith is not about seeing or having proof. Faith is about believing in something larger than myself, and that something is possible that I can't see and that I can't control. And on the one hand, I can have faith about that and believe it, but then there is another step, which is to just do the work. To do the work, to buy the field, to make the friend bags, to call your friend, to check on those in need, to plant seeds of hope. Not just have it, but to act on it. To believe. Like really believe. And if you don't believe, to act as if you believe. To act as if it is true, even if it is not, quote unquote, true. Whether it's Jesus saying, I am going to go sacrifice myself and I'm going to trust that God is going to do something. I love one of the translations that I saw. Is it the Cotton Patch Gospel or something else years ago, where the risen Jesus is asked by his people, well, and he says, I wasn't really sure how that was going to go. I've never done it before. And Jesus is terrified, right? Yeah, but why was Jesus scared if he knows that God is just going to raise him from the dead? I don't know what Jesus knew. I know what Jesus believed and what he trusted in. Do you understand? We have our sign on the marquee at our church building says, trust in God, but still wear a mask. Wearing a mask is an act of hope. Wearing a mask is a way of saying, I trust something bigger than myself, and I'm going to invest in it. Wearing a mask. Putting out the rainbow flag that we have in front of our building. Working the Pride booth at the Pride Festival. Caring about something that you can't control and that you're not sure about and that you don't know what the outcome will be. That's paper crane making. And so much of the time what we want instead is just to know what's going to happen. Like, what's going to happen? I need to know what's going to happen before I can relax. You're going to have to tell me how this is going to turn out. And God says to Jeremiah, just buy the field. Just buy the field. and gather all your townspeople around as you take the deed and you put it in a clay jar and you seal it, which was how they kept records, in sealed clay jars. You keep this. This is important. A long time from now, people are going to look back and they're going to see that there was a through line of faith, that God was present. I don't know what's going to happen with this political season. I don't know what's going to happen with this pandemic. Nobody knows. The deep need for it somehow to be fixed is not the act of paper crane making. The act of faith is to say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to act in hope and believe something is possible. I want to tell you about a poem by one of my favorite poets. One of my favorite poets is W.S. Merwin. He died at age 91. He wasn't from Hawaii, but he lived in Hawaii for many, many years. And when he bought some property there, it was a mess, not well taken care of. And he moved into it and planted a tree, a sapling. The next day he planted another sapling. The next day he planted another sapling, and another, and another, and another, and another. And by the time he died at age 91, there were over 40 species of different kinds of tropical trees and plants growing in that conservancy that he had established. Remind me of these paper cranes that Jennifer made. It's a beautiful poem that he didn't write at age 91. He wrote much younger than that. And it reminded me of Jeremiah buying the field, and it reminded me of all of us showing up and having hope and acting in hope, just like that little girl making those paper cranes. He says, on the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. It's a weird line, right? On the last day of the world, I'd want to plant a tree. Wouldn't you on the last day of the world want to get in your bunker? But he says, on the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree, not for the fruit. The tree that bears fruit is not the tree that was planted. It's not about me getting to harvest something right now. Me acting out of faith is about me believing that what I'm doing matters, even when I can't see it. I can't see how it's going to turn out. I can't see what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. Shine light anyway. Are you shining light? Are you generating hope around you? If you're finding it difficult, if you're finding yourself getting stuck in despair, irritation, worry, number one, take a break from the news, at least from the news that is soul killing, and find the news that is inspiring. The voice of the prophets that says, this is something to work on, this is something to look at, this is something to respond to. This is something God cares about. But on the other side, how about some rest? Pace yourself. It is normal to be exhausted right now during a pandemic. It's not you. There's not something wrong with you. And if you're gaining a little weight and if you're feeling down, that's perfectly normal and understandable. You're not bad for feeling that way. Act in hope. I don't know what your act of making paper cranes might be, but it definitely involves finding a way to look at what Jeremiah was doing, what is going on around here that needs to be addressed, And how can I respond to it in a loving, strong way? What does God care about? Not just what do I care about how uncomfortable I am, or how unhappy I am, or how discontented I am. It's a hard time. Mothers, fathers, guardians, teachers, students, sick folks, people caring for sick folks, people providing and having to go to work, even with COVID all around. It's a hard time. It's scary. So why not make paper cranes? Why not act out of love? We are all gonna die. We are all not here forever. We are all dealing with what is right in front of us, and that's it. So what would it be like to be bold and courageous and say, I'm gonna act as if there is a God and there is hope, and as if what I do matters. Go find it. Mother Teresa said, find your Calcutta. What is yours? Today, right now. Not a gigantic project. Maybe just checking in on somebody. Or maybe just speaking to the powers that be. Whatever it is. Hope. Buy a field as the armies are approaching. Make more paper cranes. They're good, right? Plant a tree on the last day of the world. So as you go from this gathering today, may you go into the world with hope, believing that God is at work and that you are part of that work, and that what you do is important, even if you don't know how it's going to turn out. Go into the world and have courage. Be kind. Trust. Have hope.